Episode 150 of the podcast. This week we'll talk about routines and being flexible, their advantages and disadvantages of both of these styles. You're listening to the Creating Great Grooming Dogs podcast. I'm Chrissy Newmeyer-Smith. I'm a certified professional groomer, a certified behavior consultant for canines, a certified professional dog trainer, and the owner of Happy Critters in Nashua, New Hampshire. And this, my friends and colleagues, is the podcast where grooming and training meet. For many of us, for the human end, routines can be super helpful. So as groomers, we're often taught to do things the same way or in the same order. And the reason for that is because it will help you with your speed and your efficiency. It'll help you prevent missing or forgetting something, like, oh, did I do that dog's dew claws? If you have a routine, you're less likely to forget. And it will help you put some of your work on autopilot. And for many of us as humans, we form patterns and routines even when we're not trying to. Many humans, but not all humans. And some humans struggle with routines, and we'll talk about that in the next part. But the routines are something that most of us are trying to have in our workplace for grooming. So do routines help the dogs? And I'm going to say sometimes, because every dog is different and every dog is an individual, just like we as people are. So for example, my border collies would love to have everything in their lives as a set schedule. Oh man, they would love that. But the poor little guys, that's not what they have. But they're border collies. They're bred to think about patterns. It's part of what we like about them. So some dogs don't necessarily pick up on routines, and I kind of imagine that they must live every day as a big surprise, which is kind of adorable, right? That's just my thoughts on it. But a lot of dogs don't pick up on routines very quickly, and other dogs do. Now, I'm going to say in dog training, we talk about behavior chains, and it's another way of saying a routine. So behavior chains can be really helpful for dogs and helpful for people because those are routines. Everything in a particular order can become very comfortable fast, can become comfortable faster than it would have if we were doing things out of order. A great example of the routine is flyball. And I don't know if I've really mentioned that I compete in flyball with my dogs and my last girl too, so love flyball. Flyball is a routine. Different than agility, which is always going to be a different course, or a rally, which is always a different course. Flyball is always the same. There are 2 lanes set up. The dogs are racing team against team, but the dog goes down the lane, over 4 jumps, hits the trigger box, gets the ball, carries it back over 4 jumps to their handler for some type of reward. That could be tug, that could be treats, that could be tug and treats, but that's the routine. It's always set. And because of that, we teach each part of that and lump them together so that they're always going to be the same routine. The same routine. Routine is really, really helpful. Now, another example of a routine for a groomer and for dogs, when I clip dog nails, I like to start with the right front foot, outermost toe, and clip all 4 nails and then check for a dew claw. Then the left front foot, check for a dew claw, and the other 4 nails. So I'm actually standing beside them so that I'm working away from me and toward me. This is just the way I do it. And then I do the same on the back feet. Their right back foot, pick it up, outer toe all the way in, check for a dew claw. Pick up their left back foot, check for a dew claw, next 4 toes. And because I do that same routine over and over and over again, the dogs that I groom, that I do nail clipping on, shift their weight in anticipation of the next foot. So this indicates to me that they have learned the behavior chain. They have learned the routine. It also tells me that they're calm, comfortable, and cooperative, right? They're shifting their weight. They're anticipating what is going to happen next. And there's some real value to that when we talk about dog training, because that's a behavior chain that they are now in on. Now, that's my way of doing nails. Everybody could have a different way. So, interestingly enough, even if a dog is really comfortable with nail trimming, sometimes I have a dog who is new to me, and I'm doing it in a way that they're not familiar with, even though they're good for nail trimming. But if I switch up, if I ask, oh, he's used to having it done from in front, not from underneath. Okay, suddenly that same dog is like, oh, this is more familiar. So the routine is different than my routine, but that dog has their own routine. Okay, it's still a routine. So I want you to be thinking about that. That routine for some dogs is something that they fall into also. I think that, and I know I'm being anthropomorphic here, but I'm going to say because it's familiar, it probably helps them be calm, comfortable, and cooperative and relax into the process. So for some dogs, breaking away from the routine can seem to be unpleasant. And I'm saying seem to be unpleasant because if we break away from the routine, for example, me doing my routine on a dog's nails when their routine is different, what might I find? That dog can become wiggly. That dog might be resistant. That dog might yelp. That dog might try to dance off my table. So I want you to think about, even if they're really good, they might decide, whoa, this is weird. This is weird. So when we're doing weird stuff and things to them anyway, we can be more aware of that and help them by having routines. Now, here's another example, one from my own dogs. Yeah, so one of my guys got really, really muddy. He's super muddy, and my husband decided he needed to put him in the tub to rinse him off. And my guys are really, really good in the tub, but Daddy does it different. And Poe was pretty convinced that you don't turn around in the tub. But he did. He was just resistant at first. Because Rick's like, do you not have them turn around in the tub? Because I needed to see his other side. I'm like, yeah, I usually don't. I don't need to see his other side. My dog was pretty sure that Dad was doing it wrong, but was willing and played along. And that's what I mean, is that there's a routine that they're used to. And because of that, they're also kind of on autopilot. So if we can help them with a routine, they can also feel secure and feel like this is normal. This is part of being on autopilot. Now, like I said, some dogs love routine. Some people love routine, but then we also have the opposite end. And not everyone is like that. So I find for people who love routines, there are times when routines are not helpful. So when is that? That's when a dog is having a difficult time with your routine or your procedure or the challenge. And sometimes we as humans are too rigid with our routines. And we don't even know it because we're like, I'm doing my job. I'm doing the thing. I don't know if you've ever had a habit that you weren't really aware of, but you start recording a podcast and you'll realize how often you say, and I'm going to leave those ones in, but I've gotten better about it. There are still a lot of ums, things that you are not aware that you do. We have routines that we're not even thinking about, and sometimes we as humans are being very rigid about it. So for example, I do nails, I do all of the nails in this way at this stage of the grooming. And we don't necessarily think about leaving some wiggle room for the dog who can't handle that. Like, oh, this is the way I do my nails. This is when we do it. We do it as prep work, or we do it straight after the bath, or we do it before trimming, whatever that case is. Maybe it's I always grind, or I always clip first, then grind, or whatever that rigid routine is. Sometimes we, as humans, have trouble breaking away from it when a dog is having difficulty. That can be really hard for us as humans. And when I say making accommodations for the dog, that can be really hard. So what kind of accommodations might we make? So for example, I may trim one nail and then move back to something like brushing their shoulder. We have a lot of brushing to do, so I don't need to do the nails all in one sitting. I can go back to something the dog is comfortable with and then circle back and do maybe 2 more nails. Now, I will say for people who really like routines, this can seem like chaos. And if it helps you, having a notebook beside you so that you can keep track of which nails you did, if that's something you're doing, like for nails, if it's something that has multiple little pieces that all need to be done, if circling back stresses you out or makes you feel like you're going to forget something, go ahead and have a notebook out. And just write it down. You don't need to write it out in words. You could just do, circles for each foot and just cross off which foot got done. But think about keeping track of your progress because it's going to be very different than your routine. Now your brain has to think about it. And for people who like routines, this can be really, really hard. Now, in the next part, we are going to talk about the people who are really flexible and don't really deal well with routines. If you're enjoying this podcast, please remember to subscribe so that you don't miss any episodes, and tell all of your friends. So let's talk about flexibility. For many of us on the human end, routines are really difficult to establish. Some people even find routines a bit stressful. And I'm going to share here that I'm kind of in between. I like small routines. For example, like doing the nails in the same order. I like that kind of small routine, but the idea of a rigid routine, like doing the exact same thing all day, every day, like an office job, would kill me. I just can't do it. I like to change things up, like being house call and having a different grooming setup at each and every house, every day being a different place that I'm going to. I like having change. I like being flexible and adaptable, but I'm kind of in between, thankfully, because when I need to adapt, I can. Because when does this help the dogs? So I'm going to say the people who don't rely on routine here have an easier time. Because adding steps for a dog who needs help, or switching the order of their routine without feeling stressed about it, without worrying if they're going to finish. And some dogs need us to reevaluate our routine to accommodate them. So the people who are really flexible, who have trouble with routine, sometimes do really well with these kind of behavior cases because they're more adaptable. They don't worry about routines anyway. So they're like, I'll keep track if I got all the nails done, you know? Did I circle back and get the left eye? Yeah, okay, I got the left eye. Sure, yeah. They're more easygoing. They're kind of just circling around the dog and just getting everything done in whatever order they chose that day. Not necessarily the way we usually teach grooming, because routines are helpful, but for a dog who's having some trouble, who might need us to accommodate them, to reevaluate our routine, the people who have trouble with routines are going to be able to adapt quicker. So, for example, you're going about your drying routine, and maybe the dog has trouble when you get near the ears. Now, people with a very rigid routine are going to have some trouble here. People who are more flexible are already like, well, what are we going to do next? And here's where I usually am trying to tell groomers, the dog's having trouble near their ears, this is your decision point. This is where we make some changes. And it's time to think about the dog. Is there a medical reason why this dog is acting this way when the dryer got near their ears? Is it the volume of the sound? Is it just like, would it change to maybe a happy hoodie or cotton in their ears or wrapping a towel around their ears? Would that help? How can I help this dog be calm, comfortable, and cooperative? Would a dryer brush be helpful? So there are many things that we could change up, but we have to let go of the routine. There's a downside to being flexible too. What's difficult for us if we are more flexible is that we don't really use a lot of routines. But even with the dogs who require extra help, there's a real benefit to teaching these dogs a routine and trying to work toward them learning this is the way we do it every time, because learning the steps and being able to calmly anticipate what will be coming next has some real value in dog training. So if we're able to, we need to still be working toward, okay, this dog is having a problem with this. This is the way we're going to proceed. And I'm going to try to proceed this way with you from here on out. And to build on that. So it might be that in the beginning, we're accommodating an awful lot until eventually they're understanding this is the way we do things. This is how we do it here, and feel comfortable with the steps and the process. So that's the downside to being flexible, is that we don't always help the dogs learn a behavior chain and learn a routine. If we're too flexible, it makes it really difficult for dogs to figure out what's going to come next. So we want them to know what's going to be happening next and allow for us to be flexible for them. Some examples of teaching a dog who's having difficulty about a routine could include how to stand still on a table while we lift their feet, and the way that we're going to lift their feet, and the order that we're going to lift their feet for doing a nail trim. It could be that they get used to the way we put them in the tub and the process where we scrub them. Wetting you down, scrubbing you, wetting you down, conditioner, wetting you down, toweling you off. If we can make that process very familiar and keeping in mind calm, comfortable, and cooperative for many, many dogs, that's going to be enough for them to start to relax into what we need to do. So if you are having a hard time with routine, the good news is that you can break routines up into smaller pieces. And that's what I mean by I like small routines, but not necessarily like the big picture routine. No 2 days are exactly the same in my world, and I'm fine with that. Other people find that to be chaos, but I like small routines. Small routines. So an example of humans with a small routine is that no matter what time I get up or what I'm going to be doing on that particular day, the first thing I do when I get up is I let my dogs out, start my coffee maker, and gather up the dog food and get ready to feed them. That's always, always, always going to be the first things that I do. That's my routine. But that could happen at a different time each day. So when we look at small routines, we don't necessarily need to do everything for a dog in the same exact order. Not everything. And what I mean by small routines is that maybe it's just we need to really stick with a rigid routine while drying this dog, because we've worked on a routine for drying because that's what this dog has trouble with. But then the rest of our grooming could be, oh, I think I'm going to trim his legs first and then into his body, or the opposite. I don't know. So it's about having some routine. And that's where these 2 points of view come in, is that neither one of them is right or wrong, just that we have to be able to adapt to the dog and do whatever it takes to help that dog learn more about our process and feel comfortable with it. Now, another example for you, I get a lot of dogs when they're older and they have some health problems, or maybe they're an adult who is just going through this point where they are no longer good for grooming wherever they were being groomed before, and I work them up to the point where they're really good for grooming. And then I want them to also be good if they go to their old groomer again. So I start changing up their routine. I start getting them used to beyond what I usually do, to some other ways that people do it. For example, when the dogs that I groom go down south for the winter, some of those dogs, I'm like, okay, I'm also going to teach you a different way of doing your nails. Because some people like to do them from in front and some people like to do them from underneath. I'm going to make sure you know about nail grinding. I'm going to make sure you know about nail trimming so that when you go to someone else, it's not going to be unfamiliar. So sometimes I'll take a routine and then start building out new routines around it because I'm a training geek and I can't help myself. But I want you to be thinking about sometimes a dog finds that familiar. That routine is really helpful for the dog. So being flexible is important if that's what the dog needs, and coming up with a routine is important if that's what the dog needs. But we all have to circle back and think about what this dog is looking for. What does this dog need to be calm, comfortable, and cooperative? So some of it's going to be the human end, how we feel about routine. And a lot of it's going to be the dog end and how they feel about routine. And are we pushing them into a routine that they can't handle? In which case we need a new routine. So if you're really drawn to routines, if this is something that, your whole world is around, then I want you to start thinking about these as additional routines. Oh, what? I know. If you are really drawn to routine, and you turn everything into a routine, a task, a behavior chain, like this is the way we do it, then I want for you to think about it as alternative routines. Oh, this dog needs extra help, so I have a new routine that I'm going to try with this dog. And then later on, maybe steps can be removed from that routine to streamline it. And hopefully that verbiage makes sense to the people who are really drawn to routines and structure. And for the people who are more flexible and have trouble with routines, I want you to think about sometimes building a good habit with a dog can be really helpful. And it doesn't have to be the same thing every darn time for every entire grooming process. But if you start writing down in your notes, this dog, we have a habit of doing it this way. Sometimes I find for people who are more flexible, who maybe think of themselves as ADHD, the idea of, this is the way we've been working on it, and this is the habit we're trying to build, doesn't seem as intimidating as the rigid structure of routine. So be thinking about writing extra notes. Did it in this order, and dog was good. Maybe continue to do it in that order so that the dog can continue to learn. So for you, it might be better note-taking just to remember which way you did things and how the dog responded so that you can replicate that next time. And that might be what helps you, as a more flexible person who isn't really good with routines, help the dog learn some structure and help the dog learn how to anticipate what is coming next. If you'd like more information, you can find me at Chrissy@happycritters.net, happycrittersdogtraining.com, or you can join the Facebook group, Creating Great Grooming Dogs podcast, or the Facebook page, Creating Great Grooming Dogs. I really look forward to hearing from you.